today I'm pouring some fall candles, and if you have watched any of my previous candle making videos, you have seen how to pour candles. I have done soy wax candles and beeswax candles in just a standard candle jar, like a clear glass mason jar or just a standard size candle jar that are usually about 3 inches in diameter. Today, I wanted to show you how you can determine how many wicks to use if you're pouring into a larger vessel or like a unique shaped vessel. I love collecting vintage vessels when we go out to local thrift stores. I just always have my eye out for different vessels that would make beautiful candles. So like this set of 3 flowers, they are like a really nice heavy stone dish, and I just feel like they will make a really beautiful candle. So we picked those up, and then I also love turning these vintage crocks into candles, specifically these like larger ones, and then these smaller sizes are really nice for candles as well. But with these, sometimes you will find that they have been painted. Now, I do not want a snowman on my candle or this beautiful barn painting. Now, sometimes you'll find things like this where it's been done under the glaze, and in that case, you would not be able to remove the paint. But if it's over the glaze, like if you can take your fingernail to it and kind of scrape it off, that's a good test to do before even purchasing it, just on a small area that wouldn't be noticed, just to make sure that it is actually painted on over the glaze, because I have a trick on how you can remove that paint to make. So if you're into vintage shopping at all, you've probably come across crocks like these before, and these like heavy stoneware crocks, and noticed that when they're in really good condition and they are not painted, they're usually higher priced than when you find them with paintings on them. I think maybe a lot of people don't know that sometimes you can remove that paint. So before we get into actually wicking these jars and figuring out how many wicks each of these vessels are going to need, I will show you how to remove the paint off of these vessels. So the first thing we're going to need is a towel, just an old grungy towel to lay out your crocks. You will want a pair of gloves, citrus strip, and paper towels. You're just going to take your citrus strip. You're going to cover it well. You can use a paintbrush to do this. I have used a paintbrush to get it on before, but you can really just pour out a glob and work it in with, just rub it on with your paper towel. So I've just taken the citrus strip, and we are just going to rub it all over there, and I like to let it sit for just a few minutes before starting to wipe that off. So I'm going to leave that sit on there for a little bit. Now this one is all around the entire crock. It is not just on one side. That's why we have a towel down, so that we can keep our surface clean, not damage the surface underneath. You don't want to ruin your table. You could do this outside or in the garage, just to make sure you don't damage any surfaces or furniture or anything. So I'm going to leave that on there, just give it a nice little coating, and just let it sit for probably, I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes. This one also has some little speckles of snow all around the whole thing, but as long as I leave that citrus strip dabbed on there, it should start to eat away at some of that paint and be pretty easy to remove. I forgot to mention that it does help to have a sponge with kind of an abrasive side to it. I like to start there, and then oftentimes I can just use the paper towels to wipe it away in the end. So we're gonna just start kind of scrubbing away at this painting. You can see after the citrus strip has sat on there for just about 5 minutes, it just washes right off. So I'm gonna go ahead, wipe off that paint with a paper towel. I'm actually gonna grab the camera and show you a close-up. There are a couple of spots on here that the paint kind of settled into the kind of like the little holes in the crock. So I'm just gonna dab some more of the citrus strip on there and set that one aside while, I should put it over here so you can see, while I begin working on these others. Voila, the snowman is removed. I did take this one over to my sink really just because I wanted to clean off some of the paint from my sponge, but while I was over there I did rinse off all of that paint just in the water, all the paint that was kind of sitting on the edges there. But you can see this one is a brand new crock that will make just a beautiful candle. I love the way these candles are look when they're burning in the fall and winter months especially. So there's that one, and now I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to these others. There you have it. 3 beautiful, clean candle crocks that could also be used for other things as well. They don't have to be candles. As you can see, I store lots of things in our stone crocks, but I do love these more shallow crocks for candle making. After removing all of the paint, I did run these under warm water and clean them off just because I don't want that citrus strip just sitting on the outside of the vessel. Now that we have that paint off, let's go ahead and talk about wicking these candle vessels and how to know how many wicks you're going to need for different sizes. So a standard size candle jar like this one is only going to need 1 wick. So this is just a 16-ounce mason jar, not a wide mouth. This candle jar measures, let's see, under 3 inches in diameter. So I know that that means I'm only going to need 1 wick for this candle. So also I like to measure the largest part of the jar, and it's still under 3 inches. So that's a good rule of thumb. If it's under 3 inches, you're only going to need 1 wick. Now, when you get up to a larger size diameter than 3 inches, like let's take a measure of, say, this crock as opposed to this jar here. So this one, you can tell, is a little bit wider in diameter. When I measure it, and I'm going, so this is kind of a thick, because it's that thick stoneware, I'm not measuring all the way to the outside, I'm actually measuring the inside diameter of the candle jar, and this one is the same diameter at the top as it is on the bottom. So that's also going to be taken into account, that this one is going to burn straight down. It's not going to need to go further out to the edges in one place than another place. So I'm going to measure 3 inches, let's see, well, it's more than 3 inches, but I'm going to measure from the inside to the inside, and the diameter, you can see, is over 3 inches. It's actually almost right at 4 inches. So I'm going to need to put 2 wicks in this one. So so if you get over 3 inches, you're going to need to add an extra wick. So this will be a double wick candle. Now, if you're getting even larger, every 1 inch after 3 is going to be an additional wick. So this one, I have 1 wick for 3 inches, and then because we've gone to 4 inches, we're gonna add 1 additional wick, and that is a double wick candle. So let's take a measure of this larger diameter candle vessel and see where we're at on this one. So this one, again, is the same diameter at the top as it is on the bottom. It's going to burn nice and evenly from the top to the bottom. I don't have to worry about the, we'll actually talk about that when I get to these, but this one is even all the way down. So we're going to measure. This one is, let's see, this one is just under 7 inches. So we have 1 wick for 3 inches, an additional wick for 4 inches, so we're at 2 wicks, and then we have a third wick because we've reached 5 inches, so that's 3 wicks, and because we have reached 6 inches, because we're almost at 7, this is going to be a 5 wick candle. So we are going to put 5 wicks in this size of a vessel. Now, when it comes to candle vessels that have different sizes, so you can see clearly this beautiful sunflower candle vessel is larger, has a larger opening at the top and a smaller diameter down here at the bottom. You're gonna want to still measure by the largest part of the jar that you plan on that wax reaching the edges. So if I were to only wick this candle based on the diameter at the bottom, my wax will never reach the edges of the candle jar at the top. So therefore, the wax is gonna just tunnel down the middle all the way to the end, and you're gonna have a whole bunch of leftover wax on the outside. So I'm going to wick this jar as if the entire diameter was the same as the widest part of it. So I'm gonna measure this one. Now, I'm not going to be pouring all the way up to the very tippy top. I'm probably going to go about 1 inch down on this one. So because of that, whoops, I was on centimeters. I am going to go with this being just over, it's actually right about 5 inches. So it's right at 5 inches up to the point that I'm going to pour at. So I have 1 wick for the 3 inches, and then additional wicks for every one after that. That makes this a 3 wick candle. So I've got 5 inches of diameter that I'm going to be pouring into. That means that this is going to need 1 wick for 3 inches, 2 wicks for 4, 3 wicks for the 5 inches. So I'm going to do that with all of these. I would guess this is going to be 1 inch. I'm sorry, 1 wick. And I probably will, just because this is only 3.5 inches, I am still going to only use 1 wick in this jar, and I believe that based on the wick size that we're using and the wax, it is going to be just fine. So really it's when you reach that additional inch that you want to add that second candle wick. So that one is going to be just a 1 wick. This one is right at 4 inches, so I'm going to add 2 wicks. 3 inches is 1, 4 inches is 2. This one's at 5 inches. This will also be a 3 wick candle. Now I'm going to start actually with probably the hardest one, which is this larger vessel. And the reason I'm going to start there is because I really want to show you how I would space wicks in a 5 wick candle like this. So let's move these aside so that we can get mostly just this one here in the shot. All right, so I'm going to wick these the same way I wick all of my jars, and that is with some little wick stickers that I'll have linked down below for you. I'm going to go ahead, I like to just take these little tabs off and stick all my wicks on that I'm going to need first. All right, so we have 5 wicks there. Now, I personally do not measure in between my wicks. I do eyeball it, but I've also been pouring candles for a very long time. I've had a lot of trial and error as far as wick spacing and how wicks burn and how it melts the wax all the way to the edges of the jar. After I place these, what I will do is I can go ahead and take a measurement of them to tell you about how far apart they are, just to give you an idea. Now, again, this one is a 7-inch in diameter candle vessel. It's actually right at 6.5 inches, but we're gonna call it 7 and use 5 wicks. So I'm going probably about 1 inch from the edges of the jar on these first 2, and I'll show you how I have placed them once I have them placed. I like to have one centered right in the middle when it's a 5 wick jar. So I am just gonna eyeball and make sure that is centered, yep, as close to the center as I can get. And then I'm just gonna place the others about an inch away from the edge of the jar on the outsides. The goal here is to make sure we're placing our wicks in a way that it's going to evenly melt that wax and allow that wax to reach the edges of the candle jar. So you can see here, I've started in the center, and then I have just placed them about an inch away from the edge of the vessel. And let me see where that puts them as far as how close they are to the center. They're about an inch away from the center, which I just realized my wick is slightly off center. I'm gonna, yep, I scooted it over a little bit. Okay, so my wick is right there in the center. And then you can see that the other wicks that are placed are about an inch away from that and an inch away from the edge of the candle jar. And that's gonna give a really nice even burn on this candle where you're not having any wasted wax. So there's step 1. Now I also like to use my little wick holders. That's why I prefer these wooden ones, because I do a lot of unique size jars. And so I like to be able to just, they have all these little holes in them. So it's nice to be able to put the wick through and hold it in place anywhere that I want to, and not be limited by some of those ones that only have the one opening. So I'm just sticking it through there, wrapping it all the way around, and I will do the same thing with the rest of those. So I have just placed the wick holder tight. You want to pull your wicks nice and tight, and then just make sure that it is going straight up. So I have tightened that one. I will do the same to the rest of those, and then I will use for my center one, because not sure that's going to reach the edges. It may or may not. You may have a vessel that's too large for these to reach, but you just kind of, you use the other ones to keep it in place. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And then when it comes to wicking a double wick candle, you're really just gonna go with kind of that same rule of thumb. You wanna first make sure, imagine you're kind of placing a line just right down the center of your candle, and you're gonna want to just place it in a nice straight line if it is a double wick candle. So I'll place those and then we can see where they land measurement wise. All right, so that is probably closer to 1/2 of an inch away from the edge of the candle jar and in between. Yep, so you can see these are centered. Hopefully you can see these are centered just right in the middle, a straight line across, and they're about 1/2 an inch away from the edge of the candle jar and 1/2 an inch in between them. So if I was to place them too far out, I might not get a nice burn right there in the middle. If I were to place them too close together, I might end up with a bunch of candle wax on the outside that's left over and that tunnel down the middle again. So you really just want to make sure you have nice even placement of your wicks. And I will show you the 3 wick, which I'll start with this one here because it is the most uniquely shaped of these vessels that we have here. So when you are doing a candle vessel that starts smaller at the bottom and is going to need to reach a larger diameter at the top, you do want to place those further apart at the bottom and really go off of the diameter up at the top. So I'm gonna place these almost as it just right up to the edges, and I will place them and then I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so with a 3 wick candle, you're really making a nice little triangle. So you want all sides of that triangle to be an equal distance from the points. So these wicks are 1 inch apart and just placed like a triangle. And if you were to place them in the center, there is no way that they would reach the outside edges of this candle. Again, leaving with you with a whole bunch of leftover wax and not that beautiful even burn that we are going for. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these wicks tightly and set them with my wick holders, and then we'll go ahead and pour them. While we were measuring and wicking our jars, I did have the candle wax already melting down so that I could be ready to go when I was finished wicking these. Our candle wax is fully melted and at the right temperature. It's time to go ahead and pour that. I have set the wicks and made sure they were pulled nice and tightly and centered before I begin pouring them. And then you're just going to pour nice and slowly and making sure that all of those wicks stayed in place. and I hope that you have found this helpful. If you are looking for a more in-depth video on candle pouring, like in a standard size jar, I do have that available for soy wax and for beeswax and some of the tricks there. So that's going to share with you like wax melting temperatures and how much essential oils to use to scent your candles with. You can find all of that information in another video that is linked down below. I just really appreciate you being here and joining me while I'm pouring candles.